Hello everyone, welcome back to another Flesh and Blood video. Today, we are going to be taking a look at the sort of problem child that Flesh and Blood has created over the past few years, Kano Dressai of Aether. Thankfully, I'm recording this video a few minutes after I looked at the latest BNR. And since Open the Floodgates isn't banned in Classic Constructed, it's only I think they limited it in, or restricted it in Living Legend, which makes sense. I don't know why they touch it in CC. It's way better in Living Legend when you still have the books. We can still take a look at Kano here. Kano was the deck that I was originally going to play when I first started Flesh and Blood all that time ago, back like right before Monarch, before I pulled my Scabskin Leathers and started playing a ton of Brute. But nowadays I find myself back on Wizard, playing a lot of Acilio and wishing we had another Icelander. But Kano was always the deck that I knew how to play. It just like wasn't really my favorite. I really like it when decks are very interactive. I'm very much a control player. And where Icelander definitely fits that, Acilio can sometimes, with a lot of the instance and response stuff and maybe trying to kill your opponent with a shock on their turn, Kano is a very different beast. If Icelander is blue-red control, Kano is mono-red control. With all that, let's get started. Kano, I believe, is not a hero that we discussed on this channel yet, so I will read his hero ability. He is a little old and you don't see him very often. Kano, Dressai of Aether, is a 4 intellect, 30 health wizard hero. He has an instant ability for 3 resource to look at the top card of your deck, and if a non-attack action card is there, you may banish it, and if you do, you may play that card as though it were an instant this turn. The whole goal of Kano is to churn through his deck and then just kill your opponent with raw burn damage on their turn, or even your turn, I guess, but it's easier on your opponent's turn. You can do this with a lot of things like Ragamuffin's Hat or Storm Striders in the equipment zone, but also things like Kindle, Lesson in Lava, especially something like Energy Potion or Potion of Deja Vu to help you set up, and then eventually ending the game with the Blazing Aether after a wide Aether Wildfire turn. It's kind of the goal you want to do. You want to use Kano's ability to churn through your deck, set up those items, those energy potions, those Potion of Deja Vu's, and then just sort of blow up your opponent. Kano has a game plan to play through mid-game as well. He can chip the opponent down, play just a general more aggressive game, but Kano nowadays is still that combo bursty deck. And people generally tend to have a problem with it. Kano is like the deck you need a ton of AB for. If you look at the other wizards we have, even when we had Icelander, when we had Icelander, you needed 3. But if you look at the format today, Verdance is not threatening you that much. You can bring 1 and be fine into Verdance. And Acilio, you can bring in 3 AB, but he's also a physical deck, so it's not like bringing in armor and not AB is going to hurt you a ton. It's just if you care more about the damage or the surge effects that he's threatening. But Kano is like the deck you need high AB for, because if you don't have enough AB, he's going to get all of his damage effects and just blow you up. But this is explained a little more when we look at the cards in the deck as well as the equipment and stuff, so let's just get into that. Kano's main weapon is the Crucible of Aetherweave. This is a wizard staff, it's 2-handed, and it has a once per turn instant to pay a resource and give the next card you play this turn that does arcane damage, deal that much damage plus 1. This is notably not amp. You have to use it before you play the card, not before the card resolves. Just be careful. They're making a ton of things amp, which can happen while the card's currently in play, but this you need to activate this and resolve this. Notably, this needs to resolve before you play that burn spell. It's pretty simple though, outside of that. It's just amp outside of that. Ragamuffin's hat is pretty much just the main helmet you're going to see in Kano, the only deck that really plays it. This is a no block, this is old wizard, nothing blocks. Your tunic blocks, but it's tunic, so of course it blocks. Ragamuffin's hat has an instant to destroy it. It lets you draw a card and then put a card from your hand on the top or bottom of your deck, but you can only activate the hat if you have one card in your hand. So the goal with this is to have a card you want to be in your banish zone. So in response to a Kano activation, you'll activate Ragamuffin's hat. Say you have a Blazing Aether in your hand, and you want to draw a blue off the top with the Ragamuffin's hat. You can draw the blue with the hat, and then put the Blazing Aether on top, and then it'll be banished. Even if, actually, you don't even have to Kano activation to do that. You can, with one card, activate hat, draw the blue, put the other thing on top, and then pitch the blue to the Kano. But, I mean, then you have no cards in hand. What are you going to do to spend everything else? I guess you already comboed, sure, but normally you'll do it in response to a Kano activation. Just so, in case you don't draw a blue, you have that chance to see what you're doing first. The chest piece is going to be Tunic. This will not be your chest piece in every matchup. I'm telling you that right now. This one will only come in versus games that you're going to actually get to use it. Because if you're in a game that you will never get to activate the Tunic because the game ends so fast, there's a different chest piece you're going to bring. As well as against arcane damage, you're going to bring a different chest piece. But this is just going to be for your super late game match. Super late game, like turn 4. Because Kano games do not go that long. He has 30 health. Yes, all of his cards block 3, but if you're blocking every turn, you're going to get blown up because, you know, a lot of cards in your deck don't block, since a lot of them are setup based. So you're generally the aggro deck, and you'll block when you need to, but your life is at 30. So Tunic will come in versus the decks that can't kill you that fast, but half the format can kill you that fast. So there are other options we will talk about later. Metacarpus node is just going to be your main glove. None of the other gloves increase your damage as well as nodes. Hold Focus is the new glove that lets you amp 1, but because it's only usable once a turn, or once a game, not once a turn, Metacarpus nodes is just better because it's usable multiple times in a turn. As well as this has AB1, so versus your Wizard Mirror, you'll have AB4 actually because of the chess piece that we're playing. And then finally we have Stormstriders. This is just the way to cast a spell from your arsenal. It's just super good with your setup. It has AB2, which is really good. And it just kind of gets everything that you want. It's a burn spell that can threaten lethal. If your opponent's not careful enough, it can let you start your turns off. It's just the best thing to have. It's the best shoe. For most wizards, the only one that it isn't is Acilio, who just needs lightning grease, but can honestly play Stormstriders if you want to play a more spell-focused Acilio deck that's really not that bad. And obviously, it's mainly going to, like I said, going to be used to play a spell from your arsenal because the hat can help you play a spell in your hand. A lot of the time, you'll be arsenaling a Wildfire or a Blazing Aether if you have to arsenal a spell. So that'll be what you play with Stormstriders. Most of your other arsenals will be something like a Kindle, like something you can play, mainly just Kindle outside of that. Really, something you can play at instant speed that you don't have the Stormstriders, but then you'll have the Stormstriders to actually play a Wildfire or what have you outside of that. So with all of that, that's pretty much the main equipment you're going to be applying. The other equipment we'll talk about don't take too long of an explanation, so let's get started with the main board. The main board is going to be 60 cards. I believe a lot of my recent decks haven't been a 60 card main board, but Kano is a 60 card main board with a 15 card sideboard type of deck. You will make swaps for times you need it. There's a lot of matchups, so you'll swap out cards. Like against Enigma, you don't want to focus a lot on your combo because it's very hard to combo. You want to be bringing like Waning Moon and then going pitch to Kano to cast a spell to Waning Moon to stop their turn. That's generally what you want to be doing against Enigma, so you won't be bringing in some of this stuff. You'll bring in some of the stuff we have on the board, but we'll talk about those later. Let's start with the reds, because the reds are pretty much the most important thing that you're actually playing in Kano, because they're the things that help you get most of your damage and set up. So starting with Aether Flare, this one we have in red and blue. Aether Flare is a 1 for 3 burn spell that, which also I'm not gonna mention the block. Every card in this deck either blocks 3 or blocks nothing, so I'm not gonna really mention it. Aether Flare, uh, when it does damage, it makes your next source of arcane damage deal that much extra arcane damage. So if you hit a flare for 3, your next thing will do +3. This is important for your wildfire turns because an extra, as like this is, I would argue, the best 1-cost burn spell to have. Lesson in Lava is better if you have another pitch to Kano, but if everything's face up on the table, Flare is really good, which is why we're also on blue Flare. This deck needs a lot of blues so you can pitch to Kano. That's kind of the goal, and you want all of your blues to actually be playable if you have to hit them off Kano for some reason. And Flare blue on a big damage wildfire turn can turn into a actual threat. So blue Aether Flare is generally pretty good, and the red one I personally like. There are lists that aren't on it, but I like red Flare. Sometimes you hit it and you throw it off Kano to lead into like a big spindle or a threatening lesson that they can't fully prevent or something like that. Something that actually makes the increased damage pretty important. Aether Spindle is a 2 for 4 that lets you opt for the amount of damage you deal. Because Kano's a deck that extremely cares about what's on the top of his deck, this is just the perfect card. If you increase the damage, you can opt more, and it just lets you say, oh, these blues I don't need, they can go on the bottom. If I need a hand of blues, they can stay on top. I can, manipulate pieces. Like if I land this early, I can know, okay, well, here's a wildfire. I want this, but I don't need the other 2. They can go to the bottom for now. Maybe if I get to see them later, if the game goes that late, they'll be important to know that's on the bottom of my deck, because this is also a deck that doesn't shuffle. It's a lot of opting, not a lot of shuffling. I guess it does shuffle because of Lesson in Lava, which is pretty much a mainstay right now. So do be careful with that if you set up your deck with opt, you might mess it up if you Lesson in Lava. But since Lesson in Lava gives you a piece as well on top, that it's usually not that bad. Aether Wildfire is sort of your main card ever since it was printed. This is a 2 for 4 burn spell similar to Aether Spindle, but instead of opting based on damage, if it does damage on an opponent's turn, all action cards that do arcane do that much plus what Wildfire dealt. So sort of a on everything Aether Flare, but you have to do it on an opponent's turn. And it also counts your opponent's cards as well. So be careful if they use actions that do arcane damage. It's not even just wizard. So burn spells, if they play like a Herald of Ravages that does 1 arcane, that will increase its damage based on an Aether Flare. So do be careful versus some matchups that do randomly have arcane damage. Or like if a Runeblade attack does raw arcane damage, that could get you. And it has to be an action card too, so like a rune chant won't work, but an actual action could get you. Just be careful with it. But even then, you're going to throw this, try to do as much damage as possible with it, and then play out a bunch of other burn spells to try to make your Blazing Aether incredibly powerful. This is sort of the main card you want to find because it just gives you so much damage in a turn. Blazing Aether is one of Kano's 2 specializations. This is a free burn spell that does arcane damage based on the amount of arcane damage you've dealt to the hero you're targeting with the Blazing Aether. So if you have done 10 damage in a turn, Blazing Aether will do 10 damage. Usually it'll be more because it'll also get buffed by Wildfire. Or like a Flare even. But this is your main win con. You want to do your whole thing and then throw a Blazing Aether because that just doubles the damage that you've dealt. There's not really much to say about Blazing Aether. It's at 3 because you need to see them at some point, and you don't. And it sucks when if you lose them all by blocking with them, so you need to be on 3, I think, right now. Kindle is a instant. It just says amp 1, and if you have no cards in your hand, draw a card. This is kind of just your best arsenal a lot of the time right now because it's so easy to just use Ragamuffins to put the Wildfire on top of your deck. This can draw you a blue to pitch to Kano. It also increases the damage of your Wildfire, and it's actual amp, so you can play it after you play the Wildfire, which you'll generally need to do because you want to be playing this when you have no cards in your hand. Kindle is just really good. You can see a lot of Cindering Foresight in some decks, but this deck is not on Cindering Foresight. It is just on 3 Kindle. I believe those decks, though, even still play 3 Kindle just because of the potential that Kindle can give you. And then the last red in the main board is a 9 of, so we are on the 3 yellow and 3 blue as well, and that's Open the Floodgates. This is a 2 cost, 3 arcane damage burn spell that has a surge effect, which surge, as I've said before, and like a Cilio, is if the spell does more damage than its base. So the yellow does 2 if it does more than 2, if the blue does 1 if it does more than 1. You get to draw 2 cards. Yeah, they said they were going to ban all the tomes, all the draws, and then they gave Kano even more draw. This one does cost 2, but if you do actually land its surge effect, it's pretty much game winning. The combo on Kano with these is to land a Wildfire and then play this after another to just draw so many cards and do so much damage, and then end with the Blazing Aether. All of them block 3, so they're all just easy to defend with as well if it doesn't come out that you need them. So this card's just really good and important for what Kano wants to be doing when he just wants to blow someone up. These can come down if you are not planning on comboing an opponent, which makes sense. This is generally just a combo card. It's better to play higher damage burn than these, so you'll do that there. But if you want to combo someone, this is the card to do it with. Moving on to the yellows, we only have 2 yellows in the deck that aren't already talked about. Lesson in Lava is Kano's other specialization. This is a 1 for 3 burn spell that, when it does damage, lets us search your deck for a card with cost less than or equal to the damage that it dealt, and then shuffle our deck and put it on top. All of the first 8 heroes have some form of tutor. This is Kano's tutor. This one's mainly going to be used to hopefully hit for at least 2 to put a Wildfire on top. But there are definitely situations where you only hit for 1, and then you just put a Blazing Aether on top, and just try to do the same thing. Depending on what you already have is what Lesson's good for. But obviously, if a deck only brings 2 AB into you, it's just a free Wildfire on the top because you can Crucible the Lesson in Lava to make it 4. They can only prevent 2, so you get to tutor at 2 costs. Very simple. Lesson in Lava also gets to like chain on your Wildfire turns, so if you hit with a Wildfire and then you throw a Lesson in Lava, you can tutor up another Lesson in Lava, Kano, play it, get another one, Kano, play it, and then get a Blazing Aether, which that happens sometimes. That's sometimes how you'll win on your combo turns. Just do know that you can tutor Lesson in Lava with Lesson in Lava if you really, really need to. The next card is Sonic Boom. This is a card that some Kano lists aren't on because sometimes it can kind of hurt you. Unlike Kano, who can banish any non-attack action, Sonic Boom can only banish wizard non-attack actions. Just mean if you hit any of your potions, you won't be able to banish them and play them off the top, which can suck sometimes, but you do need to play the energy potions and the potion of deja vu, but Sonic Boom is incredibly good with Open the Floodgates, which is why we are on 3 copies. This is a 2 for 3 yellow burn spell that if it does damage, lets us look at the top card, and if it's a wizard non-attack, we can banish it and play that card as though it were an instant, but that card costs resource less, where that's how much damage Sonic Boom dealt. So if Sonic Boom hits for 2, we just get to play any burn spell in our deck for free off the top. So a really good card in our combo turns, really good just consistency card, lets us churn through our deck even more. If we opt with like Gaze the Ages, we can guarantee the Sonic Boom hits something that we actually want. Just it's again a pretty decent card that helps us with our combos. Again, it could come out if you really think you need to for other cards, because again, it's only that good on combo. It's not the highest damage burn spell in the game. So that one again is up to you what you decide to cut. I will of course I haven't made the sideboard guide yet, but I will note them when I talk about the sideboard guide. I think Sonic Boom is definitely better than Open the Floodgates, though. So if you were going to cut, like, I would cut Open the Floodgates yellow before I cut Sonic Boom. Possibly even red. I think you might want to keep blue in just because it's a blue. But I definitely cut probably the red and the yellow before I cut the Sonic Boom for anything else. And then finally, let's take a look at all the blue cards. We already looked at the Open the Floodgates and the Aether Flares, so we have a bit of other blues. You'll notice that most of these are Zap statline cards. Of course, we're not playing Zap anymore because we don't need to. Aether, Twining, Destructive Aether Tide, Overflow the Aether Well, Pop the Bubble, and Prognosticate are all at 3, with Sap at 2. All of these do 1 damage to either any target or target hero. Arcane Twining and Aether Tide are any target. The other 4 are only target heroes. But that's because, reasons, I guess. All of them are Surge that target a hero, except Destructive Aether Tide, which gets to target anything and still be a Surge effect, which is a little interesting, but I guess it's an M, so that does make sense. The main reason that you want them to be any target doesn't matter anymore because it's only versus, I guess it does because of Prism, but only versus Illusionist does it actually matter, or like allies, but you're never burning an ally with one of these. The main goal of these, though, is to be cards that we can hit off of Kano on combo turns that we can just play that can carry an Aether Wildfire buff, but all of them have effects that are actually still pretty important that we do kind of care about. So let's go over them all one by one. Aether Twining has an instant speed effect to discard it in AMP 1, so it can be an extra damage on a meaningful spell. Destructive Aether Tide is some arsenal disruption. That's really just why it's in here. Other than that, it's just better. Zap doesn't... Which one targets? There's one from Uprising. The 0 from Uprising targets. I don't think that one's Zap. I just think Zap was the original. But it's just better than that one, which we actually did play. Aether Dart, I think. This is just better than Aether Dart. And Aether Dart was playable before. Just we got a ton of these Zap statline cards in Rosetta. So, like, Aether Twinning, Destructive, Overflow, and Pop are all from Rosetta. So, they just got outclassed. Overflow, the Aether Well is actually really good. If you do get to Surge it, you gain 2 resource. So this one's one of the better Surge effects to be able to play on those combo turns because gaining resources in Kano is very, very powerful. So, and since this only needs to do 2 damage to actually get that effect, it's very, very good. Pop the Bubble is a Surge effect to destroy an aura permanent that hero controls, which matters versus our Illusionist sometimes if they play a action aura matchup or against Prism, which this deck can sometimes struggle against because we don't play many poppers. I actually do have poppers in my sideboard, but a lot of Kanos don't. Prognosticate lets us opt, so that's another good one. This one, just like Overflow the Aether Well, is just one that you'll be playing at 3 no matter what because it has an actual positive effect. And then Sap is at 2 because it removes an energy counter from a permanent they control, which is mainly going to be for -IO because all the... Or no, those are all steam counters. Well, if something has an energy counter. I don't remember exactly what has energy counters. I'll have to look it up, but I know you play 2 Sap just because it's the best thing you could play there. You could play something like Aether Arc, but sometimes the Ponder is weird. You don't want to Arsenal. You generally don't want to Arsenal these. So sometimes the thing doesn't matter. But there's something. I don't remember exactly what it was energy counters. But if you find you don't need these, you can play, to be honest, any other Zap. It doesn't matter. The rest of the blues in the deck are just things we are going to be using to set up. 3 Energy Potion is core. Every Kano deck starts with 3 Energy Potion because setting these up just lets your combo turns be so much better. Potion of Deja Vu lets you sort of do that Ragamuffins hat thing where you can set up the top of your deck to banish certain cards off Kano at certain times. So Potion of Deja Vu is really good. And then Gaze the Ages is also just a really good card. It's a 0-cost blue that lets you opt to, but if you've played another wizard non-attack this turn, you put it into your hand after it resolves, so it lets you pitch it to Kano right after, or pitch it for another card that you need to play. So very, very good card. The last 2 blues in the main board might be a little expensive for some, so there are replacements in this deck's maybe board, those being Will of Arcana and Eye of Ophidia. These cards are good in Kano. Don't get me wrong, they're very, very good. Will of Arcana gives you an extra amp when you pitch it, and Eye of Ophidia lets you opt, which happens before the Kano resolves, which means you can see the top cards first. These are beneficial to the deck. However, there are some reasons you might not want to play them. One, if you don't own them, that's perfectly fine. There are replacements, we'll go over them. But also, because they aren't cards we can hit off Kano, if we see these on Kano, like if we flip them with our ability, our turn just kind of ends. Because with something like the potions off Kano, we can just put them into play, but these you can't even banish since they're not actions. So play the deck if you think you want them, and you already have them. You can play them. I would definitely recommend playing them because their benefits definitely outweigh their downsides. But if you do not own them, instead, you can play a third potion of some amount of 2 of these, but the third potion of Deja Vu, the third of that 2 of Burn spell. Again, I have Sap here because Zap's the thing in the deck. Or Potion of Clarity because it's more opting that can help us on our combo turn. I would recommend, if you're going to play Clarity, to play 2 Clarity, and that's probably what I would play, to be honest. Since the Eye of Ophidia is an opt thing, I'd want to have more opt than, a third Deja Vu and another Burn spell. But that's going to be it for the main board. So let's take a look at the deck's inventory. Starting with the equipment, Waning Moon is going to be a sideboarded weapon. We're going to be bringing this in whenever we bring in the Alluvian Constellas, as well as against Enigma. So the reason for that is Waning Moon is more damage than the Crucible of Aetherweave, obviously, because it's 3 versus 1, or 2 versus 1, but that's still better. Sometimes pumping up the 1 burn spell could be really good, but having this actual burn effect is very strong. The reason why we're bringing it in whenever we bring in Alluvian Constellas is because Alluvian Constellas gets more value since Waning Moon costs 2 to activate, where Crucible only costs 1. So when we get free activations of this, it's way more valuable. Just considering that we're already paying AB for the Constellas, that we're getting the value to use a weapon, why waste it on not Waning Moon? Waning Moon's also good versus Enigma, specifically because Enigma's wards, whenever they die, if it's the current active attack, they don't get their action point because the attack's not on the chain anymore. So you can use Waning Moon to try and threaten your opponent's wards if they swing them at you, or at least make them pay AB, and then hopefully a burn spell could come in after, because you have to play a non-attack action to actually attack with the Waning Moon. Hopefully you can use that to deal with the opponent's wards and have them have less aggressiveness into you. So as long as you can do that, you're in a very, very good spot. We have some other cards that can help against Enigma too, but mainly going to be that Waning Moon. Alluvian Constellas is a chess piece that we bring in versus wizards because they're going to do a lot of arcane damage, so we'll get a lot of value off of the Alluvian Constellas effect, as well as against Rune Blades because they have to do arcane damage. Alluvian Constellas, if you don't know what it does, the first time it prevents arcane damage each turn, it gets an energy counter. Oh, I guess this has energy counters for Sap, but sure, dude, you surge to Sap in the Wizard Mirror. That's pretty... Okay, that is pretty difficult, I will say. But yeah, I guess you can remove an energy counter. Alluvian Constellas can have up to 4 energy counters. And at instant speed, you can remove 2 to make your next staff ability, so Waning Moon or Crucible, cost 3 less. So you'll be using this to make your Waning Moon free to get more damage, pretty much. And it also is AB1, because you need that to prevent the AB damage with it. So this is going to be here for matchups that do arcane damage, because getting the value off this is way better than Tunic. And then the final equipment in the deck is Spellfire Cloak. This is what we'll be bringing in when games are way too fast. Decks used to play Threadbare Tunic, but because we're drawing so many cards, we can't play Threadbare Tunic anymore. Spellfire Cloak is a instant speed 1 resource during an opponent's turn only, which we care about because we're Kano and probably killing our opponent on their own turn anyway. It does have AB1, but we're never playing this into an Arcane Barrier matchup because Alluvian Constellas is goated. The rest of the sideboard is just some other things to help us deal with Enigma or any deck that we don't want to be comboing. Aether Quickening and Swell Tidings are just 2 other burn spells that are really helpful. Aether Quickening is a 1-for-4 that if it surges gets go again, which it will probably never surge ever, at least on our turn for the go again to matter. So it's just a 1-for-4 that can target any hero. So yeah, just Scalding Rain. And Swell Tidings is a 2-for-5, so it's just better than Voltic Bolt because it has a surge to make it Ponder. Again, the Ponder sometimes is not going to be useful because we don't want to arsenal most of the things in our deck. Just a few key things like Wildfire, Blazing, or like Kindle. But it's still a 2-for-5 that can help deal with auras versus Enigma. The Scour is in the deck for those similar situations. Any deck that's playing a lot of aura tokens or free auras will want to bring Scour into because, well, it just blows them all up. Especially into something like Runeblade if they're going to try to OTK you. This card can be incredibly powerful, especially against like Florian. If they end their turn with Rune Chance, you can like pitch a blue, blow up 3 of their Rune Chance or 2 of their Rune Chance and like a embodiment if they have one. Somehow, I guess they could make one, right? And mainly just 3 Rune Chance and threaten 3 Arcane at them. So just some extra removal there, as well as Vinset. If they're setting up Rune Chance, you can mess with them. People have brought it in against me against Cecilio. Hasn't really worked, but you do you. It stops me from bouncing them, I guess. But, oh well. Scour is just a pretty good card, though. You don't actually need this one at 3. If you want, you could go to 2 Scour and play a 3rd Wounded Bull, or this is a tech slot card. Wounded Bull, we will talk about it, but you could go down 1 Scour if you want. Before I talk about Wounded Bull, I'm going to talk about Imperial Ledger. This is going to be coming in versus the games where you're actually going to be playing cards on your turn. Think like Enigma, like those really slow matchups, because a lot of them are bringing in like Oasis and other prevention effects. So Imperial Edict, especially against Oasis, is just used to say, okay, this card's in play. If I'm going to be trying to kill you on my own turn, let me make it so you can't Oasis me real quick, because that's game winning, or game swinging with Oasis Respite. So this is just tech against that. You don't need it again, but I mean, I think it's good to just have the one. It's legendary anyway. And then 2 Wounded Bull. Now, a lot of lists are not on Wounded Bull. This card used to be played a lot when Kano played a pitch stack package with Sink Belows. And maybe also Fate Foreseen, but I think it was just Sink Below. The reason for that was because you could go through, you weren't killing your opponent at combo speed. So you'd go through your deck at least once, which means you could play all of the Sink Belows and all of the Wounded Bulls before hitting these off Kano really hurt you. But now, since Kano is a lot more combo based, Wounded Bull and Sink Below are a lot worse because hitting them does absolutely nothing. The reason why I still have Wounded Bull in this deck, though, is because the matchups you're bringing in Wounded Bull are not matchups you're going to be comboing a whole lot often. Yes, Prism, I believe, is a matchup that you I don't play very much Kano, I will admit, but I believe Prism is a matchup that you want to be comboing, and this card is good into Prism. But this card is mainly for decks that you aren't comboing, but also aren't games that are, super incredibly fast. Like, because the really fast games you're going to combo. The really slow games you're going to combo. Those like mid-rangey games where it's like a back and forth are when you really want the Wounded Bull. And it's also useful because it's just a 3 for 8, so if you find it, it's a big number. A lot of decks won't expect you to do it as Kano. So, and it's a popper. It's a 3 for 7 popper, so it gets around Triumph, I think, is the one that drops attack by 1. You don't need these in your deck. These can be another burn spell. I've seen a lot of in Eternal Inferno, but I have not played that much myself, so I'm not sure on how good that one is. But I do know Wounded Bull is a pretty good card, which is why they're here. If you think you need more, you can go down a Scour. I would at least play, though, if you weren't going to play the Wounded Bulls, the 3 equipment here, the Quickenings, the Tidings, at least 2 Scours, and I would recommend the Edict. Because I think, again, this card is pretty strong. But other than that, that is going to be the end of the video. The BNR that was shown today, time of recording, Monday the 11th, brought with it a ban to blue Count Your Blessings. So if you looked at that Ira deck from last week, you should still play Gravekeeping because Count Your Blessings still exists. And what else is banned? Oh, High Octane, which I was considering making a Dio video. I'm glad I'm not anymore because you don't have High Octane anymore. Also, Datadol got hurt pretty bad in Blitz, and Zen's back in Blitz, but Belittle's gone, so. Oh well. I don't play Blitz very much, but the CC changes definitely do change the format, and I think Kano definitely has a pretty good spot. Right now, the 2 things that got banned were something that helps very, very slow decks, which Kano was pretty good into already, or hurt pretty slow decks, which Kano was good into, which hurts Kano, but also hurt Dash IO, which was a deck that could beat Kano because it was so fast and had 3 AB base, and even the ability to play a Spell Void 1. So it can help Kano. It really is dependent on what the meta turns into, because Count Your Blessings blue being banned, I don't think makes people stop playing Count Your Blessings. I think the 2 decks that the decks that played Count Your Blessings before will still play Count Your Blessings. Just now you have more room for another card because you don't have to play the blue one. Because you can't. So it depends on how the format goes. If it becomes a more aggro dominant format, then Kano is going to suffer because those games turn into more coin flippy. More coin flippy based on who draws better. Do you hit your combo early enough? Do they just blow you up? Into slower matchups, it becomes a slower format that's going to be better for Kano because it's going to give Kano more time to actually commit to killing your opponent. But if you enjoy Kano, I'm sure you probably have a few things to say. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. I don't know how many people make it this far in the video. Let me know in the comments what you're excited for coming into this November ban list format. The next BNR is in a month on, I believe they said December 16th. So this November format, what are you guys most excited for? Are you excited for the 2 weeks post Jarl? The 2 weeks pre Jarl for the 2 weeks post Jarl depression because you're playing aggro deck? Let me know in the comments if you made it this far in the video. And with all of that said, I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.